So it really means whatever the client wants it to mean. So I had lots of different types of clients. Some people are just into health and fitness, some are changing jobs, some are launching or relaunching music careers. I've had artists trying to begin to build out their portfolio and begin to get some recognition. One of the things I like about the job is everyone is different and everyone has their own agenda and needs. It's an interesting journey, not that I use that word very often. So I was a journalist for many years, worked on local papers for 10 years, then went to London and then helped launch a very major news website. And I grew to hate the job, partly because it was making me unwell. I was, eating at my desk and not moving. I had young children who I was finding it very hard to find time to see, or when I was seeing them, I was very tired. And also I felt journalism has become very negative. So I decided to get out. And the first thing I did was I worked as a personal trainer. I had a personal trainer of my own, and the thing I liked about him was that he was a normal guy. He wasn't like a bodybuilder, and he didn't grunt and shout at me. He was just an ordinary guy, and I thought, actually, that's the kind of trainer I'd want to be. So I started doing that. And then over the years, and particularly since COVID, it's become clear that people are training not just for their bodies, they're training for their minds. And I think in 2020, between lockdowns, all the clients who came to me were training for their well-being, their mental well-being rather than their physical well-being. And so it seemed a natural progression. And I'd been told in the past that I perhaps should coach and that I am quite empathetic to people and I understand people, but I'm also very practical. And I thought maybe this was the time really to kind of weld those things together and maybe go more into wellness. So the difference between working on wellness and life coaching and PT is that with PT, we're standing in the park and I'm saying, do this exercise, do that exercise. The coaching is very much a conversation like we're having now. My business has always kind of grown organically. I mean, I do have a plan, and actually that's one of the things I always find with clients is actually motivation gets you so far, but actually what you need is a plan. And in a way, the motivation can follow on from the plan. Though I have plans and I help clients with plans, and I think plans in some ways are almost more important than motivation. I don't have a definite business plan in saying this is where I want to be in a certain time. I want to keep finding interesting people to work with. So I don't have a plan of particularly where I want to be. I have a nice clientele and I'd like more clientele. I think it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of years. I think Britain is going into a very difficult place and I don't know how that's going to look for people. And some people, might be looking for inspiration and help and looking after themselves and coming up with a plan for their own lives. Other people might be saving every penny. I think it's unknown territory what we're going into. Most of my work is around this area. I kind of move between the Olympic Park area and London Fields, and I've lived in the East End for sort of 22 years now. I've always worked as a PT in kind of London Fields, the Olympic Park area, and so I used to do my admin, kind of meetings with clients on the move. I've owned studios in the past, and I've worked in parks, and I'd often end up doing my admin in a cafe. Then I decided that I wanted somewhere a bit more focused. Came here. I felt like a natural fit straight away. It's a little bit more relaxed and less corporate than some of the others I looked at. There's a series of little booths and you can sit in there and you can just have a conversation and no one else knows what you're talking about. And I find I get more admin done in an hour here than I would in a day at home or in a cafe. And everyone's really friendly. It's very easygoing. It's not at all like I imagined these kind of workspaces. I've kind of always worked alone and on the move. It's actually quite nice, even if you're not necessarily having a conversation with someone, it's quite nice to have like-minded people around you. I think the high moments come in my work regularly because it's when someone shows faith in you and they decide to invest some of their time and their money into you. And I'm not selling a product, I'm selling, in a sense, myself and their belief in me, and I'm always internally grateful that they put that trust in me. I can think of particular moments when you kind of get your first client or you suddenly realise you've got 10 clients and then you sit back and you go, actually I've got 40 clients. And those are kind of great moments, but you don't tend to have them at that precise moment. You have them when you sit back and you go, oh, hang on a minute, a year ago I was in point A and now I'm in point B. Low points are interesting because I think like a lot of self-employed people, you have those moments when you might have a couple of setbacks. So you might lose a couple of clients in a week. I remember one week when I was quite early on as a PT, I had one client move to Milton Keynes, one moved to Berlin, and one, I think, lost her job and so decided to take a break from training. And I was like, oh, it's all over. The game's all up, and then a month later it's fine and you've picked up new clients, and there's always a churn of clients. And I think that was in that cycle for several years where there would be a little churn and I would go, oh my God, it's all over, they found me out. But then I always pick up clients, and I actually tend to retain clients, and I think that is something, again, I'm really grateful for, but also generally takes away some of those lows. But I think as a self-employed person, there is sometimes the tendency to overreact to a setback. But if you trust what you're doing and you trust the process, then it will be fine. If it's not fine, then that's fine as well, because you can go, well, what do I need to do differently? Yeah. So I've been in East London 22 years. I still feel in a way like I'm a late arriver. Although everyone's been really welcoming. I know more of my neighbours in East London than I've ever known anywhere else I've lived. And I grew up in Brighton, I've lived in other places in the south, all across the south. When I first came to Hackney, I went to Broadway Market and there was 8 stalls. And now it's dozens, and it's a kind of international draw. No one went to London Fields, particularly after dusk, because it was somewhere to be careful about going to. But within 10 years, I was working in the park every night without any trouble. Areas change, and some are more dangerous and some are more friendly, and London is very mixed, and you deal with that. I think the big difference I see in East London is the entrepreneurial spirit. One of my daughters was saying, what do you want to do kind of when you're older? And she said, oh, I want to have a burger bar in a van, which will go and sell burgers, and then I'll have a florist and I'll do this and I'll do that. And I thought, that's very interesting, because in other parts of the country, I'm sure kids go, I want to be an architect, or I want to work in the shop or whatever. And I think kids in London, particularly East London, of all kind of backgrounds, see entrepreneurship around them all the time. And they think you don't have to fit into the box of going and get a job. You can just do something in music, or do something in food, or coaching, or design something to sell. I think they see people doing it, so they believe they can do it as well. Yeah, and it's interesting when I go out to Brighton, if there's an empty shop on the high street, it seems to stay empty for a long time. If you have an empty shop open up in Hackney, pretty quickly someone's putting something in there. Even if it's a pop-up. People just want space to do things.
Yeah, fantastic. Would you rather travel back in time or into the future?
Back in time.
Any reason?
To interfere. To change some things, yes. I think there's some big stuff that, could have changed the course of history, and where do you start? But I also think there's some very particular things with people close to me that if I'd known things about them then that I know now, I think I could have helped them in different ways.
But what would you prefer, 4-day week, or is it kind of 5 or 6 days?
I used to do 7 days a week, pretty full on. I now do 5 days a week, a little calmer, really to support my wife and to support my children. And I think the answer increasingly is I'd take the 4 busy days and 3 days of peace and activity and recreation and whatever.
Okay, in terms of special skills, would you rather have super fast typing speed or just the ability to read ridiculously fast?
I love reading. I find it hard sometimes to find time, but actually part of my plan for myself is to create some space for reading every day. And I don't know if I'd want to read it fast. I kind of quite like reading at the speed I'm reading at.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's lovely to meet you.
Well, lovely to meet you.